Hello, welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, hosted by me, Jack Perks. Professionally, I'm a wildlife cameraman, but I dabble in podcasting, and each Tuesday we release an episode as I have a chat with scientists, artists, filmmakers, and passionate people all about nature in a light-hearted and certainly not serious way. Hello, or welcome to another instalment of Jack Does Stuff. And this week I'm going bat detecting. I'm going full batty. And I'm joined by guest Michael Walker. Michael is the Nature Recovery Manager for Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. And he takes me out to Ploughman Wood, which is a Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust reserve. And we also go to Colwick Country Park. First we go bat surveying and we go looking for bats in bat boxes. Then we head out and actually go bat detecting. Bats are a subject that I know shamefully very little about. So it was really interesting kind of delving into this microcosm of British natural history and finding out a little bit about all the species that we've got, particularly the species that are closer to home. Michael unashamedly admitted that he is also a listener to the podcast, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I think it's great that someone is actually listening to some of the waffles and rants that I do. So thanks for listening, Michael. I've known Michael for years. He's a lovely bloke. And he's a very good photographer as well, actually. Does some cracking stuff. As a result of going out with Michael, it also gave me the kick up the bum to put 2 bat boxes at the side of my house. I bought them 2.5 years ago when I first moved in, and finally got round to it because I thought, right, I've got to do more for bats. Because I thought that you had to have bat boxes right at the top of your house. But apparently not, and we do talk a little bit more about bat boxes during this podcast as well. So thanks for giving me the kick to do that, Michael. What I thought I would do is something a little bit different today, which is just go through a couple of Batman references. What's reminded me is this because Michael is Nott's Batman on Twitter, but we've got a few connections to the Cape Crusader in Nottinghamshire. So the first one, in The Dark Knight Rises, which is the third film in the Christopher Nolan trilogy, Woollerton Hall, which if you're from Nottingham, you'll all know Woollerton Hall, was used as Wayne Manor. So if you watch The Dark Knight Rises and you live in Nottingham, you'll see a very familiar Woollerton Hall in the background. And Woollerton have somewhat unashamedly marketed the hell out of that. And they do a lot of Batman stuff. And they even do bat detecting at Woollerton as well. But we've got a couple more darker connections to Batman. So many of you will know Batman's hometown, Gotham. But what you might not know is that it's actually inspired by a town in Nottinghamshire, Gotham, as we'd call it. Now, the creator of Batman was originally going to use New York City for Batman, but he didn't want to kind of get tied up in politics and real-world situations and thought it was better to create his own city. Most of Batman's villains are insane, so he wanted to find somewhere that had a connection to insanity. Now, when he was looking up towns and villages in the UK, Gotham, came up. Now, this is a little village just outside of Clifton, where actually I grew up, so I know Gotham pretty well. And sometime, I think it was the 1700s, I might not get the exact dates on this, but the king wanted to put a road through Gotham. The locals did not want the road through Gotham. So when the inspector came to check out Gotham, all of the people in the village pretended to be mad, because in those days it was thought that you could catch madness. So when the king advisor came back and told him, actually, it's full of mad people, we don't want to build a road through here, they got away with it. So from there on, Gotham had this kind of reputation of being a bit mad. It's actually not, it's a small village in Nottinghamshire, there's nothing wrong with it, there's a few nice pubs there. But that's where that came from. So that's where Gotham came from. It came from a little town in Nottinghamshire. The third connection is a little bit more darker, and that is that we used to have a Nottingham Joker, and this was a guy who would dress up as the Joker, not that long ago, only a few years ago. And you can Google more about this. I don't want to go into too much in depth because it's got nothing to do with bats particularly. But essentially this guy would dress up as the Joker, go into Nottingham city centre and sort of bother people. And it all ended up quite bad in the end because he ended up getting arrested because he dropped a bowling ball on someone's head. But Google it. Google Nottingham Joker. You'll find out a lot more about it. So we've got a lot of connections to Batman, but we also have got lots of bats. And that's what we're talking to Michael about. But before we do that, let's give buymeacoffee.com a plug and also read out some of the comments that people have left for that. So we've got one comment this week, which is from Gillia, and she's put interesting and informative podcast. I'm biased because I think that, but yeah, appreciate that, Gillia. If you would like to donate to buymeacoffee.com, which is how we raise money for the podcast, we're also trying to raise £500 to get a new microphone for this podcast. We are currently at 75% of that, so we're not far off. You can donate whatever you can afford. There's a link in the description to the podcast where you can do that. And if you leave a message, I'll read it out in next week's podcast. So if you can do that, that's greatly appreciated. On to today's episode. So I head out to Ploughman's Wood, go and meet up with Michael Walker, and we see if we can go and find some bats. Well, welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thanks for inviting me.
So where are we today?
We're in a beautiful woodland in the heart of Nottinghamshire called Ploughman Wood, which is my second home, really. I spend a lot of time here walking around the wood, looking at its wildlife, its history, and particularly its bats.
It's one of those places I've known about living in Nottinghamshire all my life, but I've never had the excuse to visit. So I'm quite glad that we've done this today, and we can hear the leaves rustling on what is a extremely mild October day. But I guess the bats probably quite like that, do they?
It'll certainly mean that they were active last night feeding, so I'm expecting a lot of movement between the boxes from when I was here only about 3 weeks ago.
And you work for Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, don't you? So what's your role there in connection to bats?
Well, my role at the Wildlife Trust, I've worked there for just over 10 years. I'm the Nature Recovery Manager there. My interest in bats predates that by about 20 years. Bats have been a passion for getting on for 30 years now, but certainly over the last 25 years I've been really interested. I got my licence 25 years ago to be more involved in bat conservation work. This is a grey area between work and my hobbies. Most of the bat work I do in this wood is in my own time, just because I'm interested in the bats and I love this woodland.
Why bats then?
Why bats indeed? Well, I've always been fascinated by bats even before I was really interested in them. Like most sort of naturalists, I suppose, I started with birds and moved into butterflies and dragonflies.
Or the dark side, yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I sort of got increasingly thinking I've never been a twitcher.
No.
Nothing wrong with being a twitcher. I'm
No.
more interested in what's local and the conservation of species that are local to me. And bats seem to be a way where I could also put something back into conservation, because Natural England run a number, quite a few hundred across the country, volunteer bat roost visitors that visit people's homes mainly, that perhaps have just discovered that they've got bats, a little bit concerned about it, so we act as people to reassure. They may want to do work to their roof or something like that, and legally you can't do anything to a bat roost without seeking advice from Natural England or whichever country you happen to live in Great Britain.
Sort of similar to great crested newts, I guess.
Similar to great crested
Yeah.
newts, and to be able to be a volunteer bat roost visitor, I needed first to acquire a licence to disturb bats.
Yeah.
So everything I'm doing today with you in terms of checking these bat boxes, I'm using nothing more invasive than a torch.
Yeah.
It does disturb the bats. We will see the bats noticing us, but that's all done under licence. So if you see a bat box and you just happen to have a torch in your pocket, if you haven't got a licence, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, just
and
leave
even
them-
if you
leave them
have
be.
got a licence, they're probably somebody else's bat boxes who's monitoring them, so you shouldn't check those either.
You don't want to disturb them.
Yeah, I'm very strict on how much I disturb these bats.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That makes sense. And you were saying earlier that this method obviously is a lot less intrusive than, say, mist netting or harp traps or other ways that you would traditionally catch bats and monitor them.
It is. All methods of studying bats is in some degree invasive.
Yeah.
And whilst a lot of the valuable information that we have learnt about bats has come from using these quite invasive methods like radio tracking and things like that, it's all done to a very high level of skill. I'm not involved in it myself, but I've got no problems with it. Most of the real questions about how bats use habitat that's fed into conservation has all come from those kind of projects. My project here is more about how a bat's using this wood and the other woods that I monitor. And I'm getting lots of good information just by this minimal invasive method.
Well, you were showing me, and I bet you're itching to get it out again, some graphs that you just happened to whop out your pocket.
I did.
Which I absolutely loved
You
that.
like graphs?
I asked Michael something earlier, and he just whopped out a graph, and I was like, oh, bloody hell.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about temperature, obviously, because it is such a mild October, kind of worryingly mild in some degrees, and how this affects bat movement and hibernation. And you've been doing this research, so what have you found through monitoring?
Well, the other way I've monitored bats in this wood is by using bat detectors, and particularly static bat detectors. A static bat detector is, as the name suggests, is static. You strap it to a tree or some other immovable feature in a part of a wood where you're likely to get bats, ideally in an area where there's perhaps a bit of a clearing in front of it, so you're going to get gets passing. And I had that installed for 14 months, and every time I came to do my twice monthly bat box survey, I would check the batteries, swap the memory cards, and just keep it going. And I was quite staggered by how much movement of bats there was, even in the depths of winter.
So like
How many
January and... yeah.
Right through November to February.
Really? Wow.
Lots and lots of bat movement, more than I thought.
Well, you think, I mean, like, I guess if you don't know a lot, you think, oh, they just go to bed in October and they get out of bed in April and that's it. But that's not what we're finding.
Well, but that's not what we knew anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
bats do hibernate.
Yeah.
There is not much food for them in the winter, so they do need a strategy for surviving. If
Yeah.
you're solely insectivorous and there aren't many insects around for you to catch, then you've got a problem if you haven't got a solution. And the bat's solution is to hibernate. And we always knew that bats, when they go into hibernation, they don't, as you've just said, go to sleep in late October and
I'm not a
wake up in
scientist,
March.
Michael. I'm
Yeah.
afraid.
They have to get up and fly periodically to drink.
Yeah.
They're a small animal, so therefore they've got a big surface area. They lose moisture very quickly. That's why bats generally hibernate in cool, damp, humid places. It reduces, it's like caves and tunnels and mines.
How do they, just to go off on a tangent, how do they drink? They swoop or?
They can get moisture in lots of different ways. If they're feeding, they can get moisture from
The
what
food.
they're eating.
Okay.
But no, bats will drink from pools. They'll
Okay.
almost drink in flight. I was watching a Dorbenton's bat only a few weeks ago, flying low over the water, following it with torch beam, and it actually put its mouth in the water. And that was probably to pick an insect up.
They'll get some water
But
from
normally
that as
they
well.
use their feet to gather the insects. Bigger surface area, use the tail membrane of the feet. So this one was probably having a drink, a bit like swallows do. You'll see
Yes,
swallows fly-
yeah. No, I get
fly
that.
low over. So I knew that bats would be around in the winter, and I've been out on mild days myself with a bat detector around the local park where I live and found bats. But until I had this detector up, and it's no doubt it's not new. I'm sure these people have done this far sooner than I have, but I'm not a big reader of scientific journals. It was really surprising, so I've got one of my graphs here.
Here's one I made
Here's
earlier.
one I made earlier in
Yeah.
February. There was bats pretty much 75% of the nights. And on the nights that were warmest, because I've correlated this with temperature, the nights which were warmest was having up to 35, 40 passes. So a pass
Wow.
is one bat passing the bat detector. Now that could be a very busy bat passing the detector 40 times, which it probably was. Just one or two bats. It's not there were 40 bats.
No.
So every survey methodology has its limitations. We can only count bat passes on a bat detector, not which bat made the call.
No. But it gives you an idea.
It gives an idea, and I can tell that in February I had Barbastelle, Soprano pipistrelle, common pipistrelle, a Myotis species, so that could be a Whisker, the Brants, the Dorbenton's, for instance. You can't really tell them apart with a good degree of certainty. You could have a stab at it, but I just record them all
No,
as Myotis.
okay.
And the same with Nyctalus species, particularly when they're flying within a woodland, could be a noctule, could be a Lyslers. Although I do know I've got Lyslers in this wood now because I've recorded them singing.
Oh, wow.
recorded
Yeah,
there.
you said that earlier.
Yeah.
Bats sing. That's
Bats
incredible.
sing, yes, to attract male bats sing from sort of mid to late summer through into the autumn. If we were out tonight, we'd probably it's going to be mild tonight, we'd probably hear a few
Wow.
social calls, and that'll be a male bat going,
That's
listen to me,
incredible.
ladies, I'm wonderful.
Yeah, that's how
Come
you do
back
it.
to my roost. And the better the singer, the more females he'll
Yeah,
attract.
yeah, it's similar in Nottingham, really, isn't it? If you go out on the weekend, it's
It's the
similar.
market square.
I mean, you've mentioned a few species. How many species do we have in the UK? Because I'm fascinated to hear all these names, and I'm woefully under-knowledged on bats. So how many have we got in the UK?
There's 18 species that we know to be resident,
18, wow.
17 of which breed. But we do get vagrants, more and more vagrants as they probably do climate change, and
Yeah.
you get the strong winds from the
Continent.
You might bring a few to the south coast and the east coast, perhaps. Further north you get in Britain, the fewer species. So if you want to see or hear all of the species, you really need to be pretty much in the south coast,
Yeah.
and your counties like Hampshire, Dorset, Surrey, Sussex. And the further north you get, you drop a few species.
Any northern specialists, or are they all?
There are species that perhaps a little bit more frequent
Okay.
in different latitudes. Yeah. In Nottinghamshire we've got 12.
Okay.
Go a little bit further north, you perhaps get down to, don't know the exact figures, but perhaps somewhere like Cumbria, perhaps, or might be 8 or 9.
Okay.
And as you get further up, some species become far more abundant. So we've got 3 species of pipistrelle, one fairly rare, although it seems to be increasing, the Nethusius pipistrelle, which we get in Nottinghamshire. Then the common and soprano pipistrelle were only identified as 2 separate species in, I think it was 1999, so very recent. And the biggest soprano pipistrelle roosts, which can be way over 1,000 bats, are generally north into Scotland.
Oh, okay.
We've got a couple of big roosts of getting on for upper hundreds nearly into 1,000s in Nottinghamshire, but there's far more north.
Will
which
they roost mixed species? Will they tend to stick to their species?
Now you'll get, particularly the bats that like to use roof spaces, you get a big old roof with lots of different compartments, and you might have 3-4 species in a roof space, all using their own little niche.
All right, so they're not necessarily all be huddled up together. You might have a corner with some sopranos, pipistrelles, and you might have a corner with some others.
For when they're in their nursery roosts, when they're giving birth to young and looking after young. Hibernation, they'll be perhaps a little bit more mixed.
Okay.
In hibernation sites. We're a bit low on known hibernation sites in Nottinghamshire. We haven't got any of the big classic hibernation site, sort of cave type. We're not big on caves in Notts, are we? We're a sort of a flat.
Yeah.
But the further west you go, into the southwest, and you get into the caves, and
You get more
Derbyshire, the limestone caves, and you'll get far more bats.
Or more bats. So for people who might have bats in their gardens, are there any species that you're more likely to get, or does it just depend where you live in the country? I guess for in Nottinghamshire, for example, what bats would we typically get in gardens?
The species that most people will, when they say, "Oh, we get a pair of bats flying around our garden every night,"
Yeah.
almost certainly there'll be pipistrelles.
Okay.
One of the pipistrelle
One of the
species.
pipistrelle
yeah, common or
species,
soprano.
okay.
The closer to water you live,
You might get.
you might get more soprano than common.
Okay.
They seem to be more associated with water, but it could be either. So they're the ones that most people are going to notice. I live in the edge of the city, but I'm fortunate I live quite close to a country park and only about 250 metres away from the river, or a old spur of the River Trent. I've had detectors up in my garden overnight, and I've had noctules flying over, and I've had Myotis species. But I've not seen those.
No.
Occasionally I see a noctule fly over, but most people wouldn't be looking in the sky for a big bat flying over.
No, I suppose occasionally I'll put my outside light on and I'll see a bat circling around in my garden. No, it's probably a pipistrelle. I couldn't tell you the exact species.
Pipistrelles have got a real distinctive flight pattern, and the best description I had to describe the pipistrelle's flight pattern was by the person that trained me for my licence all those years ago, a man called Derek Eames, who ran the North Notts bat group, and we used to have 2 bat groups in Nottinghamshire. And he described pipistrelles as their flight pattern as a child let loose in a sweet shop. They sort of don't know where to go next. They do change direction very
Quite
almost on a
erratic?
whim, quite
Yeah.
erratic flight,
Okay.
where other species are a little bit more measured in their flight.
Okay.
So if you've got a bonkers bat flying around your garden,
It's probably a soprano.
it's probably a common or a soprano.
common or a
pipistrelle.
soprano, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll bear that in mind next time I see my bats going batty. And if people want to encourage bats into their garden, what's the best way to do that?
Encourage insects into your garden. The number one thing you can do is build a pond, which I'm sure you'd be all in favour of.
I've got
people
6
building
ponds in my
Yes,
garden,
I know
so-
you've got lots of ponds. So ponds will bring in wildlife, and you've only got to put a glass full of pond water to see the life in it in an established pond. And a lot of those are larval stages of insects that are going to be just the things that bats are going to be wanting to eat. So a pond will bring wildlife in. If you can have a bit of long grass in your garden, if you've got space for a bit of a small, I've got about a 8-foot by 5-foot meadow in my garden, and the amount of insects that come off that, just a small area like that.
I've got a meadow around my pond and in my
Yeah.
front garden.
And then use flowers that have a good scent, and particularly release their scent at night. Things like honeysuckle is a fantastic one. Nicotiana, tobacco plant, which really easy to grow. Anything that brings moths in, anything that if you see butterflies and moths flying around the plants that you've got, the flowers that you've got, they're going to be good for insects. My advice is to go to a garden centre when it's sunny in the summer. I always buy the plants that bees are on and the
Okay.
hoverflies are on.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, I don't care what they are, but I buy them with bees
Yeah.
and hoverflies on them.
That's really interesting because I assumed you would say put bat boxes up, but that makes way more sense. Like the bats, they're going to come to your garden and see it as a resource, aren't they?
Yeah.
So if you've got that pond, if you've got that wildflower meadow with the things that they're going to eat, of course they're going to visit your garden. If you haven't got any of that and you've just got bat boxes, I guess they're less likely to come.
They're not likely to be foraging in your garden
No,
in the
okay.
first place to discover that you've got
Yeah.
bat boxes. You can put bat boxes up. You could put one up on the side of your house.
They're not fussy, like there's not like north, south, east, west or anything. Or...
Avoid due south
Okay.
because you don't want, they'll get probably a bit too hot.
Okay.
But most of the boxes that are in this wood,
Yeah, we can
The-
see a few around
see
us
a
as we're
few
stood in the
around you.
woodland. Yeah.
so all the hibernation boxes that I've got in the wood are pointing north, so they
Right.
don't get the sun on them for any time of the
That
day.
makes sense.
But all the ones where I think bats might use as nurseries are either southeast or southwest. In the wood, it probably doesn't make quite as much difference anyway because
Yeah.
you've got a lot of shade from where we're
Course.
stood now. We've got quite a canopy above us, although a rapidly reducing leaf cover.
Yeah, it is coming down, isn't it?
It is,
The
yes.
leaves.
So you can put those up. 1 or 2 bat boxes could make a difference. If a whole neighbourhood did it, like a hedgehog street type thing, could make a major difference.
Yeah.
Most houses have some features on them that bats could use, although increasingly modern housing is becoming more and more bat-proof, and you're not seeing the kind of features that bats use on older houses. So perhaps increasingly bat boxes will become more important.
Would you have to be careful? Because I know you mentioned about if you've got bats in your roof. I guess some people might be wary because they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot by having protected species and then not being able to do anything at the side of their house. So is that a concern maybe, or
I suppose to some people it could be a concern.
Yeah.
It
presumably if you're putting bat boxes up, you're not worried?
if you're putting bat boxes up to encourage bats, yeah.
Then
you're
if
not
you get
likely to
bats,
be
it's
worried.
probably not much of a shock, is it?
Yeah, no. And whilst bats have to be considered during any building work, most work that you would need to do, say, to repair your house or anything like that, it can all be done.
Yeah.
It's just the timings.
Yes.
It's just you wouldn't want to do work on a roof that's got a nursery roost of brown long-eared bats in June and July, when there's non-flying dependent young in there that can't, that would be disastrous to the roost. But there's more times you can work on a bat roost than you can't.
So it's not that you
it's
can't
just
do it.
planning.
Yeah.
It's just planning.
That makes sense. And if someone, because every now and again on Facebook or Twitter or something like that, I'll see that someone's found a bat in the day, maybe it's clinging onto a wall or whatnot. What's the best procedure if someone finds a bat that they think might be in distress?
To go onto the Bat Conservation Trust website page, and I'm pretty sure it'll be on page 1, there'll be something that says, have you found a bat? And it'll give you a phone number. In fact, if you go to the Nottinghamshire Bat Group website. I know for a fact it's top right-hand corner. The phone number that you need to ring, and that will get you to the National Bat Helpline, and they will then contact a local rescuer near you.
Yeah, I'll chuck a link in the description to it
Yeah.
so people can find that out. Well, I think we've waffled enough. Shall we go and check some of these boxes and see if we can actually see a bat? 'Cause I'm itching to see a bat.
We'll try. There's 2 boxes on this tree.
Two
both
boxes.
slightly different types of boxes.
Okay.
That one has 3 banded snails in it.
Are we recording banded snails as well?
I tend not to.
Okay, fair enough.
I do get hornets in them occasionally. I always
Ah,
get bored
that's-
when I've seen a hornet.
Yeah, that's probably
There's been definitely more hornets around this summer.
all native hornets.
Yeah, the
Yeah. Have we got
the
the
big one.
non-native ones in Notts?
not that I know
No,
of.
good.
Hopefully we won't.
Yeah, keep it that way.
No, not in that one
Nothing.
either. That's a more typical experience when you go to a tree with bat boxes in it. There's
Bugger all.
nothing in it.
Great. We've got some more to check, though, haven't we?
We have, yeah, we've done.
I'm addicted now. I've got the bat
another,
shakes.
Got another 3 sections to do.
Great. Let's go have a look at some others. Okay, so we're approaching a box. So this is the cement-looking box,
This is
isn't it?
the sort of Ecocrete boxes.
Okay.
Oh, blimey.
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
No,
7, 8,
really?
9, 10, 11, 12.
Get out of here. People are going to think I'm acting again. Oh, fucking hell. That is a... Wow. There's loads of them. Look, they're
Quite a
all,
few in that one, aren't there?
they're all scrunched up. What kind of bats are they then? Can you tell?
I can say with a reasonable degree of certainty, but can't be absolutely certain without having them in the hand, and that is a disadvantage of this kind of monitoring, is that these are soprano pipistrelles.
Wow. They're all
1,
in
2,
like a
3,
little
4, 5, 6.
kind of huddle, aren't they? Look at them.
In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say that there's 13 in there.
Wow, and lucky for some.
Yes.
That's really
So I'll
cool.
take the torch off them now, that's disturbed them enough.
Yeah, so you were saying that you obviously don't want to keep the torch on too long because they'll kind of wiggle around. And that you're pretty confident that's all the same species?
Yeah, they'll all be the same species. It could be. We're still in that time where bats will be mating, so that could be a highly successful singing male, and
A lucky man.
and his harem, which is the term that it's used.
Would he service them all? Like
That would be his plan. Yes.
good lad. That's
be his
incredible. That's absolutely incredible to see them all in there. I don't think I've ever seen so many bats.
Well, I've never seen that many in that kind of box.
Oh really?
the
So that's
most-
unusual.
That's the most bats I've seen in that type of box.
Oh right. So that's not a common thing then.
I have had bats in this box before.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there was some in there only 3 weeks ago, and there were 6 in there
Wow.
on the 6th of October.
So he's either improved his singing, and he's got some more ladies, or
Yeah.
someone else has moved in who's like the kind of
Yeah,
bachelor of the woods.
yeah.
That's awesome. So you're pointing a torch at the bat box, and you're looking through binoculars to
Yeah.
get a better look. And
Yeah, I think this is a Liseless bat.
oh, okay. So this is a different species.
Yeah,
So what's making you think it's a Liseless compared to the pips we've been seeing?
well, I've got a good view of its face head on,
Okay.
and I can see the tragus, which is the inner ear. The little protuberance in the inner ear looks like a mushroom. And I can also see that this one has got, as well as the sort of fairly pale brown fur, it's also got very dark fur. It's almost got a mane around
Oh,
its neck,
okay.
which would fairly certain make that a male Liseless bat.
Ah.
It's the first time I recorded a Liseless in this type of box.
Oh, okay.
So you are definitely a good luck charm, Jack, today.
Well, you know, I've been called other things in the past, so I'll take that.
It's nice to get a positive one
It
every now
is.
and again, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I only need a couple. But oh wow, okay. I haven't actually seen it yet. I'm gonna.
Get myself off here
Yeah,
if I can get up.
yeah, no problem. That's half my trouble.
But hopefully you'll be able to see that it's. Right, you use the torch, Jack.
I'm gonna take the headphones off, so hopefully this will sound all right. And oh yeah, yeah.
See how much
Oh,
bigger it is.
yes,
Much
it is. It is, and those ears are far more noticeable. Wow. Is that typical to find them on their own?
This time of year would be.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly if it's a male, as we were saying earlier, that was probably not a very good singer. Then perhaps he hasn't attracted. I have recorded Liseless singing in this wood many times.
Yeah.
On the static bat detector.
My
So
first Liseless, I'll take that.
We finished up at Ploughman's Wood, and then not too far away, we headed over to Colwick Country Park to continue looking for bats as it started to get dark.
Well, hello. It's been a few days since I went out with Michael, and we've met up again on a very spooky night. It's Halloween, and we're going bat detecting. I thought with it being a podcast, bat detecting is perfect for it. So it's getting dark now. I'm just waiting in a car park. I imagine this is what doggers feel like. I've never actually been dogging, but I imagine waiting around in a car park and meeting people you don't know that well is all part of the course. But yeah, we'll see when Michael turns up. He's got all the gear, and fingers crossed, we can pick up some bats.
Going up to what I call Bat Alley.
Bat Alley?
Ever since I first bought a bat detector, this is where I learnt how to use a bat detector.
Right.
And you'll see it's like an avenue of trees.
Okay.
We need to go over this way.
Go over.
And there's normally always bats there.
And where are we today?
We're in Colwick Country Park, which is just on the edge of the city of Nottingham.
I know it well. My stomping ground as a photographer started here.
In fact, actually, we're in Gedling Borough at the minute. We're just about to walk into the...
I can feel it. I can feel
the city
can
coming
smell
on.
the change.
Smell the change. This is the path of the old River Trent. So this
I always wondered what this
used to be
was.
the River Trent. This used to be the loop. Colwick Loop was quite a famous landmark until they straightened the river out after the 1947 flood.
It's just a bit that's left over now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it still flows. There's still a flow through it.
Oh, okay.
And it empties out into the Trent.
I should normally build up suspense for this, but we have actually already seen a bat.
We have.
In
the car park.
In the car park. It was what did you say? Soprano pipistrelle.
Soprano pipistrelle. Yeah.
So we've seen a bat, which is good because I was expecting to hear them, not see them. So that was awesome, and it's appropriate night being Halloween, which was I didn't really think about it when we arranged it, but it's Halloween. So right, we'll make us way up to Bat Alley then.
This is Bat Alley.
Oh, we're here now.
We see the natural tunnel of trees on this path.
Okay. So you've got your bat detector out.
Yeah.
It looks like something out of 1960s Doctor Who.
That's a bat.
That was a bat. Oh.
This is Soprano pipistrelle.
And you just know that without even...
Well, I can see the frequency.
Okay.
The maximum frequency
is
54 kilohertz there.
Okay.
I can tell it's a pipistrelle by the sound.
I can see him. He's right above
just
this.
above these trees.
It's sort of like a low, continuous farting.
Yes.
If that makes...
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it's
you've probably got a much more delicate way of putting it. That sounds to me like a few Brussels sprouts gone wrong.
Oh, that's good for you now. Look, it's right above us.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
So what he's doing there is making lots of very steep turns and twists. Turns on its own wing length practically.
So when you were saying, when we met the other day about pipistrelles, like a kid in a candy shop,
yeah,
I see exactly what you mean now.
What I mean? Look, which way do I go next?
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Right, let's get run over by a bike. Oh, there's another bat. Another bat.
There's two now.
There's two. So can you tell that there's two on the bat detector? Is that livened up?
You can hear that there's two.
Oh, that's awesome.
Did you hear that? Every now and again you'll hear a fainter, more rapid buzz that does sound a little bit more like a fart.
Yeah.
Or raspberry, as we would say.
Raspberry.
On
a more civilised society, yeah.
That's called a feeding buzz.
So it's caught something and it's making a noise.
Or it's just about to attempt to catch something.
Right.
So these bats, the normal call that you hear, that it's more of a slap sort of call.
Yeah.
It's calling about 9 or 10 times a second.
Wow.
When it gets to very close to its prey, it'll speed up the rapidness of the calls.
Yeah.
And when it's just about to catch it, it's calling it about the equivalent to 200 times a second, but only for a very short period of time.
That's incredible, isn't it?
So you hear a very quick, rapid succession of calls that sounds like a raspberry. Oh, that was a bit lower now.
Oh, that was a good raspberry there. That was really... wow. I mean, this is all new to me. So then if a different species was here, it would sound completely different, would it? Or is it all pretty much of a muchness?
No, pipistrelles are very sound all the pipistrelle species sound very much the same.
Yeah.
Slight differences in the repeat rate,
Yeah.
but it's the frequency. They have a maximum frequency. So if you were to look at these calls on a computer, they would look like a hockey stick. So a long handle
Right.
with a head, and it's where the head of the hockey stick, where the frequency of the head is, helps you to identify the species. So
Okay.
soprano about 55 kilohertz,
Okay.
common about 45 kilohertz, Methusius about 37, 38 kilohertz.
So not much in it then.
Not much in it, but enough in it.
Yeah. They're not bothered by us. Oh, there's another one. 3 of them turned up.
3 now.
So, because they're getting relatively close to us, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they'll certainly come down lower.
Because there's the whole kind of old wives' tale, isn't it? Like people used to get worried about bats flying into the hair, but that's largely nonsense, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Well, I'm going to worry about it anyway. If it was.
No, to be honest, I'm going to be thin on top as well, Michael. So it's not more my beard, if anything. They'll be roosting in that.
Stuff in your beard.
They would be roosting in that. Wow. So what bats might we pick up tonight? We've had Soprano's pipistrelle. What else could we get?
We could get common pipistrelle. We may get noctule. although
Okay.
It's getting a little bit grim and a bit windier up there. They fly quite high. Britain's certainly largest wingspan bat. They haven't got probably the bulk of the greater horseshoe bat, but which would probably compete with it for the biggest bat.
Okay.
But they're very fast flying. They sort of behave a bit like a swift.
All right.
In pursuit of prey on long narrow wings. Daurbentons, if we're lucky.
That'd be nice. Do like
Um,
Daurbentons.
But this is one of the best sites in the county for bats.
Because we're sort of walking on this path, but it's edges the lake. We've got lots of woods around us, so it looks.
It's got a good bit of everything here.
Yeah, it looks batty.
You're always going to get more bats by water
Yeah.
because obviously a lot of insects come off water.
Yeah.
We might get other myotis bats. So Daurbentons is a myotis bat,
Okay.
but we've got whiskered, brants, natterers, which are all here.
Oh, what's that?
That's another soprano.
Soprano.
pipistrelle.
Okay. Oh, I see him. I've got him. Or her. As it's getting darker, they're kind of the lines are blurring. I'm struggling to
Yeah.
get on them as much, but amazing. That's so good to see. And they all we're talking off mic then, but they're easy enough to tell apart, most of them, or some of them not so much.
Some of them you can have a really good high degree of certainty to the point of being almost certain. Things like soprano pipistrelle, common pipistrelle. Noctule, if you can see it as well. I mean,
Okay.
it could be confused with Leisler's, but if you get a really nice low frequency call, it's a noctule. The myotis family of bats, so we get on the park here, we get whiskered brants, Daurbentons and natterers. All sound quite similar. They produce very, very short calls,
Right.
which sound just like little metallic clicks on this detector. There are clues that you can use, but it's difficult to be certain. Even when you look at them that was a social call. That
A social
that
call.
was a social call. That
So
was
it's that
common
bat-
pipistrelle social call,
Okay, so that's seen another common pipistrelle and he's saying hello.
or it's a male common pipistrelle going, "Hello, ladies.
Ah,
I'm wonderful."
what a lad! Yeah,
Yeah.
good on him.
What? That was its song.
All right, so I am going to
We're
put.
into song territory.
So
there.
Michael did send some song clips over, which I'm going to play at the end of this podcast, just so you all get to hear singing bats. But we've got live singing, so bat gig. What surprised me is I didn't assume that there would be a visual aspect, because I thought we'd just be standing in the dark listening. But actually, I can see the bats fairly. I mean, your eyes adjust quickly, don't they?
Yeah.
And you can see the bats pretty well.
Pretty well. I mean, you can at this time because. Oh, I think I caught. That's a noctule.
A noctule. Ah.
Not though, they're jackdaws.
I was going to say, it's fucking big if that's. Yeah, that's different, isn't it?
It's different.
It's sort of like going.
That's up there somewhere,
So that'd be a lot higher up with
much
it.
higher up.
But
just passing over.
noticeably different though,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Whereas I said that those pipistrelles that we heard earlier on were calling about 9 or 10 times a second.
Yeah.
A noctule probably 4 or 5 times a second.
Right.
But their call has oomph. It's a
You
much
can-
longer duration
Yeah.
call. I mean, their echolocation call has got to travel a long way, and then a very faint echo come back. So it's got to be loud.
Yeah.
So that they're making a very loud and long call. In fact, they're the loudest bat.
Are they really?
They are calling. It's measured only a few centimetres from its mouth at about 120 decibels, which is over the legal limit for Rock City. You know, it's pretty loud.
So if you've got one of those bats and put it right up against your ear.
Thankfully, the frequency is a little bit above us. Although the
Okay.
noctule
Okay.
does come into the human hearing range. We can hear, with your perfect hearing,
Okay.
you could probably hear up to about 20 kilohertz, particularly when you're a very young child.
Yes.
And as you get older,
you lose that.
you
don't
lose
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That one, the lowest of noctule call, normally is around about 15, 16 kilohertz,
Okay.
and generally perhaps a little bit higher.
Wow.
A common pipistrelle. So we have 3 species.
3 species. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I just saw it then. There it is.
As we're in this sort of, the sun's gone down quite a while ago, but we've still got quite a bit of light.
Yeah, it's not pitch black,
it's
is
not
it?
pitch black yet. We can still see some of the bats will come out much later. So a lot of the
Okay.
Myotis species, the Daubenton's, tend to be a little bit later
They
coming
wait.
out. If we do see them, we'll be able to follow them with a torch over the lake.
Okay, that would be exciting. Is that they're just more cautious, you think, or their prey comes out later, or
Bit of both, I think.
Bit of both, yeah, that
Brown
makes-
long-eared is a bat that comes out very late, and they are quite slow flyers
okay?
and are quite vulnerable to.
They
I've
don't-
not seen it myself, but a friend on this park has seen a brown long-eared that came out a little bit too early, end up as a meal for a kestrel.
really
So
doesn't. Yeah,
they're
it makes sense. Nice easy meal
nice
for a
easy meal
bird
and
of
a
prey.
nice little package of protein.
Yeah.
For it.
Just thinking about how small a bat is, but then how small their prey is. If they're eating things like mosquitoes and stuff, have they got to eat quite a bit in a night, surely?
They will have to eat a lot, yeah, because it's very energy expensive. Tearing around, flapping your wings,
Yeah.
calling. I mean, the oft-quoted figure, I'm not sure who counted, but is that a pipistrelle can eat 3,000 tiny little insects in an evening.
Wow.
And, I mean, that's done by sort of weighing bats when they leave and weighing them when they come
Just
back and seeing what the difference is and
calculate,
calculating,
yeah.
I suppose.
But it makes you.
Or
Oh.
social cause.
So. Oh
That's
yeah,
a
yeah.
soprano.
So it makes you think. I suppose not so much in the UK, but particularly in countries where you've got like malaria from mosquitoes, bats are taking a chunk out of that, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Well, even here, we get lots of. If you come out here normally in this time of the night in the summer, or on a really warm, humid night, you can get bit to pieces. So I'm very, very grateful for the bats.
Providing an important service.
An ecosystem service, I think
Yeah.
we now would call it.
We're just looking over the lake here. As a plane, every fucking podcast, a plane goes over. But we're just looking over Colic Lake at the moment, and in the vain hope we might get a Daubenton's. But as you were saying, it's a little bit late for them, is it?
It's a little bit late in the season now,
Yeah.
but they've got to be feeding somewhere. But with Daubenton's bats, we don't know of many hibernation sites in Nottinghamshire, so we don't know where they go. Just don't find them in the winter. So
Are they migratory? Would they sod off somewhere else, or?
they'll be somewhere
Yeah.
within the county.
Yeah.
Or I suppose they could go into Leicestershire and the classic hibernation sites. We don't have caves. We have got mines and tunnels, but a lot of those are grilled off or blocked off. For
Yeah, not easy
probably
access.
good reason. We do find we've got a few tunnels that we can get into where we find Nattra's bats and brown long-eareds in the winter.
Okay.
We can hear a few distant bats.
Can pick them up from a fair way away.
Yeah, it depends on the species. I mean, the brown long-eared, you've normally got to be within a few feet of it.
Right.
But a noctule, it could have been the other side of this lake and we'd pick it up.
Wow. That was the one that we heard earlier that was
It's a real
high up.
chunk
Yeah.
bat.
Yeah.
Not you. The social calls will travel further as well because they're lower frequency.
And I guess that's the point of a social call, because
Yeah.
they want other bats to
They
hear
want
it.
the bats to hear it.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different types of social calls. I mean, there could be some of them could be aggression calls to other bats. Some of them are the advertisement calls,
Yeah.
just basically saying, I'm wonderful and you want my genes.
Bat Tinder.
Yeah.
So we've just moved round to the lake and Michael has shined his torch and we got a very brief glimpse of a Dorbenton's bat.
I'm just going to change bat detectors because
Okay.
I'd like to just tune into, that one automatically tunes, and sometimes it's tuning into what you're not wanting to listen to.
It's it doesn't know necessarily what you're after, does it, I guess?
No, it tunes into the strongest frequency, and if there's pipistrelles flying around, it'll constantly be going to the...
Right.
So I'm going to stick this at around about 40 kilohertz, which will hopefully...
That's sort of Dorbenton's territory, is it?
Yeah, well, you'll pick them up at that, and you'll soften the blow of the pipistrelles.
Okay.
And it'll sound like a more shorter call, but a very regular rhythm,
Okay.
but probably 15, 16 calls a second, so much
Okay.
more rapid.
Okay. We were saying earlier they can sort of go on stealth mode, can't they, bats? Or some can.
Some species can,
Yeah.
but if you're a Dorbenton's bat flying an inch above the water surface, you want your echolocation call unless you want to end up in
in the drink.
the drink.
So with that being an older...
It's just
Bat
one I can
detector.
tune. I can
It's
tune
tuned,
it. I
so
mean, I
it's-
can that other one, but it's so laborious.
Yeah,
tuning
yeah.
it. This one, I just
So this
turn
one's
the wheel.
sort of white noise until it picks up a bat, is it? Yeah.
Just heard a very faint call. It's then trying to find it in this very narrow torch beam. It sounded quite distant though.
Now you at home are obviously just listening to the podcast, but me and Michael have got the pleasure of getting a lovely whiff of blue-green algae coming off Colic Park Lake at the minute, which is it's opening up the lungs.
I think you'll find this is the more refined or less refined or rotting blue-green algae.
Oh, lovely!
yeah,
Wow,
it's a special scent.
you could make a candle out of that, couldn't
Yeah.
you?
It's much better than it was a few weeks ago, I can tell you. It looked like you could walk across to the
Oh,
island
really?
on
Oh,
top
it's
of
horrible
it.
stuff,
It was
isn't it?
been a very bad year for it this year.
Well,
Well, look at there. Look.
yeah, the hot weather is
You'll be
it's
doing
not-
no fish spotting here tonight.
no fish twitching. I'm a bit disappointed, really. Bats are making up for it, though.
We know they're here because we've just seen one.
Yeah, well, that's good.
There you go. Very faint call.
Are they allowed a bat as well if they're a fair way away? Do they?
No, they're not that
no,
loud
so it's
at
got to
all.
be close-ish then,
I mean,
hasn't it?
occasionally you'll get them very, very, very close.
Really?
But this one sounded a little bit more,
It's a bit out
a bit
there.
like the
of a-
distance we saw the other one at, which is what, 30 yards,
Yeah.
20, 30 yards.
I mean,
away,
it was-
meters.
When we did see it, it was inches off the water, like you say.
Yeah.
It was right down there, wasn't it?
There's another plane flies over. There we go. That's closer. Where is it?
I can hear it. And as you say, Dorbentons are the only bat that's plucking stuff off the water in the UK. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they're kind of aquatic. Would you call them aquatic? They're kind
Well,
of
they-
water specialists.
Yeah, this wet environment specialist. You'll
Yeah.
find them in other habitats.
Yeah.
They're specially designed for this. They've got enormous feet compared to other bats of a similar size, and those big feet are perfect for pulling insects off the surface of the water,
Yeah.
or just above the surface of the water. They use their 2 feet and the tail membrane as a net, really.
Bit like a pelican's beak,
Bit
or,
like
or
yeah,
lower,
yeah,
lower
sort of a-
mandible.
yeah, you've got that sort of membrane of
Yeah.
skin, and they'll feed on the wing. So basically, as they'll call, catch something, then they're going munch, 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 and they're not calling at that point, but they're
Yeah.
still travelling forwards, and then straight back into calling again.
This is when one of us
It's going to end up in.
goes arse over tit covered in blue-green algae. That's something, isn't it?
That was quite close. That one.
Was it?
Half the time you can be shining the torch a little bit too far out.
But it's sort of going in waves, isn't it? It must be obviously.
They're not normally as hard to find in the torch as this,
Are
though.
they not?
No,
So I was the good luck charm for bats, but maybe
no, you're just cursing. You're making me absolutely inept at using this torch.
yeah. Blame me. I'm happy. I'll take it.
But these are you picking that up? They are definitely Dorbenton's bats.
So how is their call different to what we've heard earlier in the night?
It's a shorter call.
Yeah.
So because it's shorter, it just sounds like a very metallic, harsh.
Yeah.
There's no tonal quality to it.
No.
It just sounds like a click.
Okay.
The pipistrelles we were hearing have a call about 6 milliseconds long. And
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Oh,
Oh,
there he
yeah,
is.
got him.
There
Wow.
we go. Oh, there's two.
Oh, there's two.
two.
Yeah.
There's two.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful.
Two more than I thought we were going to get when it started
That
raining
was
as we
brilliant.
arrived.
Well, yeah. The rain puts bats off, does it?
Well, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It puts the insects off.
Makes sense. Oh, that was fabulous. Two at the same
Two
time.
at the same time.
What more do you want? Well, the heavens have just started to open, so I think we're going to take our good grace of seeing a couple of Dorbentons and call that a night. But that was awesome, Michael. I'm so glad I came out to see that.
Yeah, it's always good when you're out with the bats.
Definitely.
That was Michael Walker. Fantastic time spent with him. Got to see those Dorbentons. Really vividly remember that. It was phenomenal. And all those soprano strip pipistrelles kind of huddled together in those bat boxes was fantastic. What a great bloke. Also want to say thank you to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust because they shared last week's podcast, which was about beavers, and this week's, particularly as last week's had a lot of unsavoury language at the beginning. And I've always said that this podcast is for adults. It's not aimed at kids. Do occasionally swear. Most of them we don't, to be honest. The vast majority of these podcasts, we either don't swear or occasionally swear. But every now and again, some of it does kind of come through the cracks. And hats off to Notts Wildlife Trust because they sweared it even when I said see you next Tuesday. So that was quite good of them. They did put a warning, so hopefully didn't traumatise too many kids with that. But yeah, appreciate that. So I was thinking that what I might do in next week's episode and the week after is talk about some of the podcast episodes I think you should listen to. And there's two ways of doing that. One is to go through 5 episodes that I personally like. So it might be that you've just discovered this podcast and you look back at the 100+ episode and you're like, Jesus, where do I start? So I'm going to go through 5 episodes that I think, if you've not listened to them yet, I would recommend them. I enjoyed doing those the most. They were the kind of more interesting guests. Shouldn't really say that, should I? But things that I think that people would enjoy. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the top 10 most downloaded episodes. So e.g. the 10 episodes that have been the most popular. And I'll also reveal how many downloads we've got overall because it's getting pretty chunky now that I'm happy with. So next week I'll do one of those and the following week I'll do the other. So if you want to find out a little bit more about that, stay tuned for next week. If you want to follow the podcast, we are on Twitter @TitBearded. Well, for now, while there is a Twitter, before Twitter explodes. We are also on Facebook on the Bearded Tits podcast. So do chuck us a message, tag us into what you're up to. Be interesting to see that. And if you've got any ideas for guests or topics that you want covered, then do send them in. You can also follow me on Twitter @JackPerksPhoto. I'm on Twitter @FishTwitcher. And I'm also on Facebook, Jack Perks Wildlife Media. And YouTube is also Jack Perks Wildlife Media. If you can donate to buymeacoffee.com, it is a huge help. It's the only income I get from this podcast, so any support is greatly appreciated. There's a link to that in the description. Now, next week, I am joined by Alan Henshaw as we get back on topic with rivers. And we're going to Calverton Fish Farm, which isn't too far from where I live, as I go and meet up with him and we talk all about the Environment Agency's fish farm, what a fish farm is, why it's important to restock some of our rivers, and talk about some of the processes of growing on all of these fish. It's going to be a good episode. This has been the Bearded Tits podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Cheers.